Okay, good morning, everybody. Hope everyone's okay. Hope everyone is good. Let me just start with a couple of quick caveats. The missus has done it again. She's got a delivery covered at some stage. I expect it in the next hour. You know it's going to be whilst we're live. So apologies in advance if we need to dip out. But I think there's something worth talking about today because at face value, you look at... wait, let me sort my screens out so I can actually see what we're looking at. Yeah, there we go. You look at the 3-day time frame charts that we look at every week, and to be honest with you, first glance, no change. But there is. So we don't need to talk about Bitcoin. Still inside the range. Happy that it's moved up, but still inside the range. Dominance doing its thing, and market capture's following Bitcoin. But look on the bottom right-hand corner, and let's just blow it up. We will talk about BitTensor today because it has moved up. There's a fairly decent explosion. And I use that term loosely. Particularly what's going on in the Middle East. But in terms of BitTensor's price, we have seen a very positive breakout from the combustion there against what I thought, but we will still be quite excited about that. So the question now is, we've made the move. We are up 10% on the day. We're up, nearly $100 from the bottom that was formed back at the middle of February. So where can we go from here? What are sort of the probability of further upside versus some of the hurdles that we'd have to overcome to get there? That's what I want to talk about today. Obviously, we're going to chart Bitcoin as well. And I did get a couple of questions asked, which I will go through, which is more about overall either market fundamentals or sort of overall price. If you've got anything else, drop it in the chat. Good to see everyone. And yeah. So let's just we will come back on to BitTensor, but I actually am going to start BitTensor charting a little bit more detail than we normally do, just because it's one of the only alts that we actually really care about. In terms of Bitcoin, though, going on to the 12-hour time frame, this is looking pretty messy. So let me just get rid of it. I was trying to see what the ranges were. So just excuse the mess. Just let's get rid of the fib levels for now. Just know the top of this yellow box is also the top of this fib level. But let's get rid of it because it's just... Nope, I wasn't getting rid of it. Because we're just trying to clear up our screen just a little. That's not what on earth's going on here? Can we just delete this, please? There we go. Right, so I was just trying to work out, and I'm not saying that this is a channel that we're in. I just drew some lines on the wicks to just see where we are and how this may tie in. But ultimately, what we can see, Bitcoin continuing to make its move at the moment, and we've actually just encroached into this area of short liquidations, which goes from 72,000 up to 74,000. 74,000 being quite an important level because it was where that fib level was. It's also the high that formed a week and a bit ago, and breaking out of that, we're continuing on that uptrend, which is what we talked about on Tuesday. Now, the reason I've drawn this range here just simply is try not get too excited. The alert's gone. We are above 72,000. We can pay attention to Bitcoin again. We can even ascertain that we can go slightly higher than this box. We can probably get to around about 74,500 and still be inside of that range. So now is the time in which we're going to pay attention, try and understand where Bitcoin's going. We get out of this range, even on the 12-hour candle, even on the 4-hour candle, we start building outside of this range. And I really do feel, I was going to say the high sort of 70,000, 80,000 level. Well, actually this fib level here, which is probably the 50 EMA on the 12-hour time frame, is kind of perfect target for where we were talking about. I think we've been talking about potential to get to that 79,000 for some time, but we have to get out of this range. And, on the 3-day time frame, that's not it. The range is a little bit more defined. It's 72,500. We are slightly above that at the moment. But obviously we've got, well, actually the candle closes today, but we've wicked above it, not really broken there. So 72.5 from a 3-day point of view. But when we try and narrow it down, actually we really do need to break the high that we formed back on Wednesday, the 4th of March. Get above that. And I really do feel, whilst we may get a retest, that move to 80,000 is on the cards. And I think it feels something along the lines of, breaking out of this level. Oh, that's probably gone a bit too high because I'm too zoomed in. It's because it's 12-hour time frame, but breaking out of this, retesting, and then a move up. Like that kind of thing. We see that pattern all the time, just sort of, resetting some of the overboughtness of breaking out of a range of resistance that's held us back for some time, tricking people into thinking that we're actually just popping back down and then making the move. I think that is something that we've all learned over the period of this. But still, you know, as exciting as it is that we're in the 70,000, we're in the 72,000, we have been here before. And so the same thing what I said on Tuesday, the same thing I said on Friday, and the Tuesday before and the Friday before that, you get the point. I can't get too excited until we get above that. Now, going on to one of the questions that was asked by John, and he put it in Discord, so I'm sure he's not going to mind. But basically, he's put, do you think this is a fake out? Surely the stock market is going to crash given the geopolitical situation and surging oil prices, and crypto will crash with it, albeit, to be fair, it has been relatively steady thus far. Thanks. So I think it's, you know, great question. In terms of, you know, just trying to understand how these markets work. Now, let's zoom out on the daily time frame. We'll keep this chart for now. Oh no, let's get a clean chart. We'll go on a clean one. I think it's just going to be easier to see. That wasn't clean. There we go. Oh, that's not clean either. Got to tidy my charts up. Apologies there. So this is on the daily time frame. And the reality of Bitcoin, and I think this is, we will look at the stock market as well, but we have had, you know, I'm not going to say it's a capitulation, but we've had a near 50% drop from highs to its lowest point currently. And we've seen that when we do that, we end up ranging. And from that range, we're building, we're building either confidence that that was the bottom, we're going back in, or we're building ourselves a little bit of a relief before further falling is happening. And that happened, I mean, you could argue it happened at the top where we ranged and we started to fall away. It happened here back in December and January. We ranged, we fell away, and it's happening here. And it's eerily similar. And that's the worrying part, isn't it? So in terms of the fake out, I don't think we've had enough of a move for it to be a fake out. I think we are still within that ranging element. And ultimately, we are getting excited because, you know, from the 60K bottom to 72, you know, it's a 20% increase. That sounds fantastic, you know, but off the back of a 50% fall, it's not really there. And we always have, that's why I sort of temper myself with ranges of excitement when I see Bitcoin moving up 2%. It's great, but relative to the fact that we were 126,000, I don't really think it's there. So we've talked about in other calls about cycle theory and about 4-year cycle and about the fact that it's never straight down, all these things you hear everybody talk about all the time. And the reality of it is when you see it hitting you in the face as it is at the moment, you start to second guess it. The point is that the trend down hasn't broken yet. We expect relief rallies, if you will. And unfortunately, this isn't actually a fake out or a relief rally yet, in my opinion, because we are just ranging. We haven't got out of anywhere for it to be considered a rally or a fake out. We need to break above that 72, 74, whichever level you want to do on whichever chart. We need to get out of this range and make those moves. And what I want to see from the fake out is just how, let me zoom in a little bit. But yeah, look at the steepness of these red candles. Yeah, sharp drop down there. Fake out, we're going to see the reverse of that. We want to see what we don't necessarily want to see, but what we would expect to see is a strong move of green candles up, effectively eviscerating this drop down here, and it comes back up. That's going to get people excited. Slow, steady climb outs don't necessarily get people excited. The big rapid move up, that's going to get people excited. And then the question is, well, how do we know if we have found the bottom, we're moving on, or this was a fake out? Very simply, for me, if you don't want to look at any other metric, that 97,000. Okay, we have to clear that high there. Until we cleared that, any move upwards resulting in a rejection is just a failed relief rally. And that's as simple as we need to do it. You can throw in loads of other metrics if you want, absolutely fine. But for me, I can't get really excited. 4 years dead, blah, 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 unless we get above 96,000. Now, that doesn't mean that in 6 months' time when we're down here, I can't start talking about trying to find an actual bottom. Actually, this time frame doesn't go far enough. which will be sort of roundabout here, won't it? Because then we're using a different metric. Then we're accepting that. And I'm not going to wait. Whatever price, Bitcoin finds itself down in sort of September, doesn't matter where, I'm not going to be sitting on my hands waiting for 97 so I know that it's over. This is where right now, right now where we are, the risk reward for me just isn't there to just think, right, it's time to rebuy all my spot. I could buy some, absolutely. But on the balance of what we talked about with previous cycles and how they rhyme very similarly, this rally was kind of expected. March, we see those kind of moves up, and that's exactly what we're experiencing at the moment. And so I would wait, and once we get closer to this time frame, we can start to think, well, actually buying back in at whatever the price is now is probably a better sign that we have exhausted the sellers over this period, and the move up, a sustained move up, is on the card. So that's where I'm looking at. Now, in terms of, are we expecting the geopolitical tensions in the Middle East to cause a stock market crash? I think Bijan posted in Discord, there's a couple of well-respected commentators on price action sort of saying they think the top is in on things like the stock market. Let me just clear this. So this is the S&P 500. It's the US 500. It's the futures side of that, for those of you that are wondering. And what we're kind of seeing right now is we haven't lost the support down here. So for me, it's hard to actually say, the top is in. But just given this non-directional volatility that we've had, and then this sort of curved element here, it does feel like we have run out of steam. And when we talk about steam, let's just zoom out and be realistic here. This is 2022. You can't see it. This is where the Bitcoin bear market ended. And that's its equivalent on the stock market, okay? And that was at 3,500. Since then, the stock market has gone up to 7,000, okay? So it has had an incredible run with some significant pullbacks, of course. But the point is that all of these pullbacks were quickly bought up. Drop down, bought up, drop down, bought up, drop down, bought up, drop down, bought up. You get it. V-shaped reversals every time. Now, we haven't had this drop down yet, but we aren't seeing buyers stepping in. For whatever reason, what's happening in the Middle East, any other tensions that have been going on, whatever, they haven't happened. And what we are actually seeing is people moving away from it, and generally sellers have been taking over now for the best part of, the high was in the end of January. So we're talking nearly 2 months of downwards momentum. And even within this, we can kind of see that, yes, we've had down bits, but they do get bought back up. But right now, it's generally down. Now, I think we are in, unfortunately, an events-based market at the moment. And that makes life very difficult for us, because if this turns out to be a 4-week war and Trump gets whatever he needs to get out of this, the Iranian regime is defeated, and free Iran emerges out of the ashes in the next couple of weeks, then this will be sold as one of the greatest victories for Trump's presidency. The markets will rally behind the stability that's been regained in the Middle East, and will continue upwards. It may be a failed rally upwards, but we will see a sharp move upwards. Whereas if this starts to drag out and Trump comes across as, well, he already is, moving the goalposts in terms of what he's trying to achieve out there, and suddenly a long, protracted, drawn out war in the Middle East, which will have wide-stretching ramifications, not just from the price of oil, but the tourist industry in the Middle East, the retail industry in the Middle East, all of those kind of sort of factors, which haven't really been played upon yet, are going to start to have a big effect on the stock market. And then you take into the fact that if oil is going up, we're going to have increased inflation, prices are all going to go up, and it's just going to cause heartache and headaches for Trump, for the Fed, for other nations in terms of how to deal with it, and ultimately investors are going to lose faith for a time being. Okay, just for, and I say for a time being because I don't want to drag this out too much, but ultimately, right now we're still in a bit of an unknown. It's been going on for 2 weeks. We're not really too sure who's really winning at this, because Trump will say that they're absolutely decimated. They're I've forgotten his name, but the son of the last supreme leader, he's in a coma now, missing a leg, doesn't know his name, blah blah blah. And on the other hand, what we have is continual drone strikes, and they're getting more brazen. Now maybe they're getting brazen because they're desperate, but we're attacking financial sectors in Dubai. The oil refineries obviously targets military bases. I've now read that a French military personnel has died in the conflict, and I wonder how that's going to escalate things as well. I mean, HMS Dragon's on its way to Cyprus, so I'm sure it'll be over soon. But the fact of the matter is, the volatility is still around because we're uncertain on things. Once that plays in, and 4 years into Ukraine, the market rallied hard because we had an understanding of what was happening. And as unpleasant as it is, the markets will move on quite quickly there. So do I think this is a fake out? I don't think enough momentum has happened right now for it to be a fake out. And I am still expecting this to fall at some stage. Now, why have I not said, well, the top's in? I don't know that the top's in. That was what that last 5-minute conversation was all about, I suppose. But I do have, I don't know what that's because I'm on a clean chart. But, I'd be looking, well, let's just play it safe. Let's just say 6,500, have that as a level, an area that we want to monitor in terms of, because let's face it, if we're below that, we have fallen, a decent amount, but also we've lost major support from the last couple of blips. So, October 10th, that massive cascading thing in crypto that happened, and then the end of November, which again was another big impact in crypto. Both of those having the stop loss, both of those were recovered at that level. So we lose that level, then alarm bells need to be ringing. With the NAS, for me, it's 2,400, and we got pretty darn close to that, didn't we? I mean, that's the level. We wicked down to it, but we were bought up aggressively from it. So, but this one's getting a lot closer to have a look at. So they would be the levels that I would monitor. 6,500 for the S&P, 24,000 for the NAS. We start losing those, I think you're going to see more and more commentators suggesting that actually the top has been in, and we're now in a bit of a downward trajectory. And then, you pile on things like inflation going up and everything else, and suddenly, unemployment, we might then see that snap recession that we've talked about, that we've expected in 2026. And then, once that's sort of cleared out and we sort of have to turn the money printers on, etc., we can kind of have a look at it. Oil has been a bit of an interesting one because we obviously had that massive spike up to 126, dropped all the way back down to 76. But since then, I would say generally under the radar, this thing has started to climb back up. We're nearly $100 a barrel. And, what was arguably one of the most obvious implications of a war in Iran in terms of blocking the Straits of Hormuz is really starting to come back and bite us in the arse. And whilst we may say that we don't necessarily get a lot of our oil from there, the global impact of that is really starting to be felt. Bijan again posted in Discord just a moment ago that the US have now lifted sanctions on buying crude oil from Russia. So, it's amazing what desperation can do for those moral standings that we've had for the last 4 years. And I think I'll leave that there. But one final thing, we'll see it's on the next one. The Dixie is back at parity now. We're at 100 on the Dixie. Now, we've been here before, and it is an ideal time for us to turn this around. So there's an argument to be said, whilst we have hit 100, there's concerns that that's just going to keep on going through. Just be cautious. This might actually be a bit of a reversal here, and maybe we actually see the Dixie coming down, some strength coming back into the likes of the S&P and the NAS. And that's why this is quite a confusing time. People just assume that, wars and conflicts are very easy to trade. No, not necessarily, particularly in the early days of it. It can be quite confusing with what you're looking at. Right, over to some other things. And I said I was going to start with BitTensor, so I will. And Darren, I've still got your question, but I'll do a bit of this and then I'll dip onto that if that's okay. So BitTensor, we don't normally start with it, but let's just have a look. BitTensor on the daily time frame, broken through that 50 EMA, very nicely, had its back retested over a couple of days, and then late last night or yesterday afternoon, and then over last night, we basically broke through that 215 level, which I was eyeing up, and we've made that sort of nice clear move through. So on the face of things, what are we really looking at as the next, area for interest? You have to suggest. I mean, of course, anything can happen, but there's clear air, no real support resistance until we get to 263, which would take out this vector candle here from the way down, and it also ties in at 270 with the 200 EMA on the daily time frame. That is what I'm looking at. And I said this yesterday, break of 215, the run to 270 just seems like an almost foregone conclusion. Now, it'd be remiss of me not to say that the RSI is looking rather overbought. And so it may not be in the next candle or two on the daily time frame that we get there. We may have to take a little bit of a reset for this to move back up. But just looking solely on what we can see outside of the RSI, I don't see of any reason necessarily for this to pull back. Obviously, as it stands, we would form a green vector candle, but I think the momentum up there could quite easily hit it and fulfill that. I'm going to come back to the daily when I want to talk about some of the other areas that we need to focus on. But let's just drop it down on some lower time frames and just see where we're at. So if we go down to the 4 hour, sorry, I'll get rid of that, but just look how much that vector candle from the previous one ties in. So we can kind of see from the 4 hour time frame, up until the early hours of this morning, it was a nice steady move up. We were just broke through the 50 EMA, finally with a green vector candle that actually stuck the landing, and then just used the 10 EMA to climb back through. And as I say, we were sort of flirting for most of the day with that sort of 215 kind of level. And then this on the 4 hour candle, but it was actually around about 11 o'clock at night. We finally broke through it and up we went. And sod's law, I never opened a trade. I was in bed, so I didn't take that trade. You wake up now, and it feels like actually trying to force a trade at this level is quite difficult to do, despite my conviction, I suppose, that actually maybe 270 is the place it's going to go. Because when we now look at the 4 hour time frame, there is an opportunity now for this to reset. And I don't mean it has to crash all the way back down, but we are looking considerably overbought on the RSI. We're at 83. Okay, let's minimize that down now. We don't need that on the screens as much. We can also see that we have run up into the 800 EMA, and with 36 minutes to go, we are rejecting from that. And I just feel that actually we've moved away quite considerably from the 10 EMA. And for me, I feel like actually what is more probable on the way up to 270 is a retest back down, and maybe a genuine retest of this 215 level, taking out that vector candle, coming back, bear in mind how much support and resistance it was. So coming back to that 215 level before making that move up, refreshing the RSI. I'm not saying it'll go all the way down to oversold on the 4 hour time frame, but it's certainly getting it back into neutral territories before making that move back up. And so I am positive on the price action at the moment. Maybe I've given it the commentator's curse. However, just given, and we'll cycle through some other time frames in a moment, just given the strength that the move that we've had over the last 24 hours, don't be surprised if there is that pullback. I mean, even if it's at 220 and just takes out basically down to the daily open, takes back this vector candle completely before making that move up, I can certainly see that. And I think there's a JOLTS job opening data today, but most people I think are going to be waiting for the FOMC, which is a foregone conclusion. It's 99.1% chance that we're going to stay where we are, but we get volatility on the day anyway. So as I mentioned on Monday and Tuesday, when the VIX was over 30, this gives us, I think, a free pass for positive momentum to the FOMC. Maybe that's the cause of the reversal and the fake out. I don't know. But overall, I can still see BitTensor moving through. Drop it down to the 1 hour time frame, and I'm effectively doing this just to show the same story, I suppose. But you can now see the strength. A nice double bottom here, breaking through the 50 EMA, retesting the 50 EMA. There's an argument to be said, actually. We haven't talked about this in a while, but is that rise 1, retest, rise 2? Sorry, it's in white. I should really have done it in yellow or something. Oops, that's not in yellow there. Is this a rise 2? And if so, could we expect that move down, as I say, to sort of that 220 level, resetting RSI, coming back to test the 50 EMA, and then making that rise 3 move in. And I put rise 2, rise 3 there. That should be rise 2. Making that rise 3 move up to the 270 level. I think there's a good possibility of that. It's going to look even messier now when I sort of put that next move up, but something along those lines there to that level, and then you get some sort of M, and away we go. I think there's definitely something worth looking at there. In terms of the RSI, let me just clear all of that because it's going to look messy as anything when I do this. So I'm just taking it all off. Hopefully you saw that. So we've got the RSI sort of building here. We are in overbought territory on the hourly time frame. It's kind of just moving up. We're seeing these resets coming through. I suppose there's a trend line you could almost draw on the hourly if you want to monitor it. That's sort of this line here, which gives it a little bit of wiggle room to come down. Obviously, the fall in the RSI is not dependent on the size of the move. On the price action, but nonetheless, maybe that's something you can consider to just see whether or not we lose it. But I think this again just backs up that move down to the 50 EMA, and you can see I'm not saying it's vertical, but it's been a very strong move for BitTensor, which is good. I crapped on BitTensor's price for a while, and long term nothing has changed within that. But it's nice in the short term to give some opportunity either to open up some longs. Don't know how this works with subnet prices, but also if those of you are believing that we haven't finished in the bear market, it's maybe giving you an opportunity to think, actually, I want to take some risk off the table. There's that there to consider. I mean, we'll have a look at the 15. If any of you are DJing enough to have a look at the 15-minute time frame, again, it's quite orderly. It really is. We would expect the 15 to come back and test the 50 a lot more. And that's even only down at 230, so not that far from it. Could we get a retest down to the 200? I mean, it's been a while since we've done it, in terms of number of candles, and that would tie in, I suppose, with that sort of 220, 215 level we talked about. So back onto the daily now, and let's get onto some of the things that we do need to consider. So that, that short term, that's where I see it. Maybe it turns around here because we find out, that US loses an aircraft carrier or something like that. But what do we really need BitTensor to do? To buck the system and to climb above it. The reality, nothing of this has changed. And so, yes, I sold at 290. No, I haven't bought back in. Do I think the bear market is over? No. Do I want to own any spot? Not really. It's spot alts, that is, not really. And the reality is that's the level we've got to get past. That is where we need to get past. We need to end this repeated history of lower highs and lower lows. And so that's what we've got to do. Now, we could make this run up now. But much like what I said with Bitcoin at 96,000, until we get above 290, I'm not sure I'm really too interested. Now, I actually think, realistically, I've got to move it to there. 300, because that's the 800 EMA, the Gandalf line. And then you're like, well, what was the real Gandalf line for all that time? It's 315. That's what we talked about for ages. The Gandalf line happened to be there. Now not so much, because we've been in such a downtrend. And so we've got quite a bit of work to get through. 270, obviously. 290 for this previous top. 300, 315. So we've had the clear out. We had to get past the 50 EMA. We did it. Great. We've got the rest to get through. So I think there's an opportunity for 270. And for me, I'll never say never on anything. But either the bear market has to end and Bitcoin's going to rally too, or BitSense is going to buck the system completely for this to rally without the rest of the market moving. So, yeah, that's just where it is. But last couple of days can't diss its movement. Moving back onto the Bitcoin, I was going to say BitTensor there. So now we're starting to see a bit of a picture here. BitTensor broke through the 50 EMA. Last time Bitcoin got to the 50 EMA, we saw that rejection. We're right on it at the moment. 73,000 is the 50 EMA level. There we go, 72,800, 900. So, we could foresee that actually we do ultimately end up running out of steam. But if we can get past that, if BitTensor was the precursor to what Bitcoin can do, we break out of this range. We close above 73,000. Not only do we close above the 50 EMA, we're also breaking a close above the range, continuing the higher high, higher low mentality. And then just look at on the daily time frame, the plethora of vector candles that we have an opportunity to try and recover. But for me, the move most logically, I think it's the 12-hour took it to 80K. Can't remember that, but it's around about 81. I kind of see that being the move. I said 79 in the past. Let's just say 79 to 81 as a working kind of range. And that's where I see that next move going towards. Now on the RSI, there's plenty of room for it to be able to run as long as we can get past that 50 EMA. That's the thing that is holding us back. And I dare say if we don't, then we're probably looking at something along the lines of, I don't know how to draw this. Let's just draw it wick to wick, but we're probably looking at somewhere around about 66 as another retest, maybe 67. Go down to the 4-hour time frame. Trying to get rid of some lines so that it looks a little bit neater there. And, we're continuing with the same kind of move up. Okay, yeah, we've cleared the 200, which we'd expect. They're kind of aligning in a better way, but we still got to get the 50 to cross back over on the 200. That'd be a nice move for us to have. RSI is getting close to being overbought, but still got wiggle room, and we'd expect it maybe to dip in a little bit. But for me, it's at 74,000 close. We've just got to get above it, and then we can look to. The 800 is now at 83, but I certainly think we can make a move and a nice chunk into these vector candles before turning around. The structure still looks good in terms of, we are going higher and low. We're just now near that pinnacle of either breaking through it. And to do that, remember, we've got to get past that 50 EMA in the daily time frame. But that's where I'm viewing things. At the hourly, again, looks strong. We're high, but we're not in overbought territory. Still room to run for this. As a matter of fact, a lot of these candles are just standard volume. We're not getting too excited around it. And what is interesting is, despite the moves up, we're still actually in extreme fear. We're at 15. Today, I imagine we will close higher if we can keep this, but we haven't really moved that much in terms of this. So ultimately, yes, it's nice to see those moves. Warning signs are here that we may have a little bit of a pullback because exhaustion in terms of the buyers just needing a break from it. But there's nothing to suggest at the moment that these trends need to break. I would just be mindful from the daily point of view of that 50 EMA. That's it. That's where I'd be looking. So, levels to think about for your weekend. Well, we're already above the 72. So maybe you could set an alert for 74. And again, 66. Break below that, you might want to crack your chart open and see what's going on. So Darren asked a question. He sent it to me here. And he said, I got a question for the call. If BTC is, say, at 60K, it doesn't matter, but in his example, and BTC all belongs to people who are holding for the long term and don't want to sell, does that price hold at 60,000? So what you're effectively saying is, whatever the price is, let's just say 72, every single person that owns Bitcoin will not sell. That's what you're in your scenario. Can the price go down? And the reality of it is, well, yes. And there's a few reasons as to why that's the case. But so first and foremost, the price of Bitcoin, if you think about it, it's set at the last traded price. Yeah. So that's why sometimes you get these big wicks down on the day. But if the price at the moment, I'm going to go to your 60 example because I think it's just easier in terms of numbers. So 60K, if someone did come in and sell at 59,990, that's what the price would be of Bitcoin. All it does is take one person to sell one part, one Bitcoin, no matter how much of a holder they are, to sell it. Now, your example is nobody's selling. But what you forget is that there is new Bitcoin being made every 10 minutes. Okay? And they don't always go to retail. Mining companies get those. They have overheads to pay. They may look to sell. Even if it is $10 below the 60,000 level, it is going to drive the price back down. The price then moves back up when someone thinks that's of enough value to buy it at 60,000 or whatever. So there's two reasons. The other reason that we need to think about, and this one that I think a lot of people forget, is leverage trading. So, leverage companies, Bybit, Binance, whatever, whoever you end up using, offer the opportunity for you to trade Bitcoin without owning the underlying asset, the spot asset of it. And so, market makers or, a mass group of retail, I suppose, can apply things like short pressure, liquidations, all that, just to cause the price to move back down. Even if no one's selling spot, the price can still move just because of what is happening in the leverage market. And October 10th was a prime example of that. The market absolutely crapped the bed from 114,000 to 100,000 in the space of 30 minutes. Do you think retail caused that? No, it was a cascading liquidation effect that caused that to go. I imagine 90% of all spot that held was held because they didn't even realize it had happened. It was actually caused by liquidations. So for me, Bitcoin's price, it's not set. I know your example is it's set by everyone holding BTC, but it is actually set by the last traded price. So, even if 99% of all holders refuse to sell, that small amount would cause the price to drop by whatever level. And then, derivatives, leverage trading markets can also move the price around. So it's just something to consider there. In terms of the rest of the market, we'll just quickly go through. I mean, ones that I'm in, Pippin, I still haven't closed that long. It's still in a profitable position. Silver's kind of back to where I got in, which is a bit of a shame. But this is kind of where I'm looking. It's back on the 50 EMA, so daily time frame. So we're just gonna have to wait and see. Obviously, the weekend's gonna happen, so the price is gonna go flat now. So it may just be a point of trying to get out and moving that to something else over the weekend if I'm still wanting to trade. Back up Ethereum. So yes, okay, we've had that move similar to Bitcoin. It still hasn't got past that 2,220 level, which is the 50 EMA. So it's not quite as close to 50 EMA as Bitcoin is, but we're on that move up. But again, we need to break through that and then an opportunity. If Bitcoin got to 79,000, do I think that Ethereum can make its move all the way up to its EMA's a bit? No, I don't. I'm sorry. I would more put Ethereum initially sort of around there, which is pretty close, but instead of being 2,900, 2,750-ish dollars. But again, we've got to get above that. Plenty of room on the RSI for it to do that, but it's got to make that move. In terms of some of the other ones, well, I don't think anyone in the group that I know of really holds any of these at the moment. But we'll just, a lot of them are just riding up to that 50 EMA on the daily time frame. That's I mean, Kaz is quite a bit away from it, to be fair. Links there. Near will be above. Near's done well. Here's the risk with Near, actually. I was going to say I kind of like this. This could be an M. I don't think it is, but it could be. I don't think I'd want to place a long here right now. Just it looks such like a classic M right now. Maybe I'd like to see maybe one more bump before I went long on that one. It's nice to see it above. So, the rest, that battle that we described with Bitcoin is happening with everything else in terms of that 50 EMA needs to be breached. The likes of Zcash is a lot further away. Zcash, what a steady decline this has actually had. And so for me, actually, despite Bitcoin ranging for the last sort of 8 weeks, yes, this has, but it's still trending down. I think there's short opportunities. I'd probably wait for it to lose 200. It's not that far off doing that. Bitcoin dominance, I don't think there's enough to talk about with Bitcoin dominance at the moment. We may see us coming up to that sort of 59.5% level. We see a retracement of that. Now, remember, actually, this is kind of important because the last few times that Bitcoin dominance has been moving, it's not been because altcoins have moved better or worse. It's actually retail or positions moving from Bitcoin into USDT and Bitcoin dominance versus USDT dominance. So maybe we might see that actually the market is getting exhausted. Bitcoin dominance comes down and it won't be alts that move up. It will be alt USDT, which is resting on the 50 EMA, another indicator actually that maybe what we might see is this moving up and a correction across Bitcoin and the board. We don't never look at totals anymore, but this is total 3. I don't think there's any need for me to chart it because it's exactly the same as the rest. So sorry if people are thinking I'm skipping out on it, but total 2, total 3 looks exactly like Bitcoin and Ethereum, really. The VIX, it had that big move up, came back down, reset. It's still pretty high at 26, and that just goes to show the level of uncertainty it's around. Ignore the circles, that was from a couple of weeks ago. So it's not quite high enough for the when it's high you buy, but it's still, it's still quite high there. We really want to see that come back down. Gold again, trying to find its bottom, I suppose. For it's could move down to 4,900 maybe. I think if it did, silver would be coming down to probably the low 70s. But for me, I'm monitoring just silver and that 50 EMA. That kind of battle in and around 82, which we're pretty close to at the moment. So hopefully this is either a bottom. We lose that and I will just cut that trade and take the hit, although getting it in at 83 won't be too bad a position. In terms of some of these other pension, pot one, Circle, I don't really have too much to talk about with each of them. I'm just seeing if anything sticks out. Nothing really does. Again, Astrid's had a bit of a funny time, hasn't it? So obviously had this big move down. I know Sam talked about this yesterday. And then today, market's open, it's had a hell of a 20% move up. It just kind of needs to start clearing this noise at 20 cents. From a technical point of view, my worry is just with the general move of the market and, is this just trending downwards as the rest of the market is? I don't know. I'm not actually sure which market it even trades on, if I'm honest. So I am not that informed, but I just keep it on there out of general nosiness and interest more than anything else. And I think that's probably it. I've rambled on far longer than I expected to. So apologies for that. I think we end on this chart. I think we have to. I mean, why not? Why not celebrate BitTensor's move up that it is? Hopefully some of you have caught that move or are happy with where it's going. I would just remind you, for those of you that were accepting of the bear market theory, we'll call it a theory, and wish you'd got out when price was at 140, not wish you got out at 140, but when it was at 140, wishing you had got out earlier, ask yourself seriously what has changed now that we're $100 higher. Because I'm not saying for you to sell your bag, but maybe there's an opportunity just to offset a little bit. We know the markets don't always move in one direction. I will caveat with saying that BitTensor does go on these runs sometimes. So, it's not unheard of that we have good, strong moves up. And maybe we do get that move to the underside of this yellow line, which we haven't talked about in forever because we've been nowhere near it. But that yellow trend line goes all the way back to the beginning of 2025. And that ties in with, higher than 270 is 285. So yeah, maybe we can get a little run there. So just, if you're concerned about it, start monitoring the price, start setting alerts for the price. And once you feel that the valley has run out of steam, maybe then consider that actually taking profits may be a good move to make. Other than that, though, all that's left for me really to say is try and enjoy the rest of the start of your weekend if you can. It's Mother's Day this week. So maybe there's something you can all do on Sunday with your families. I don't know what I'm babbling on about now. I'll be back on Tuesday night as usual. I'll be around all weekend in Discord. And yeah, other than that, I shall speak to you all soon. Cheers now.